Hello and welcome at the Tudor and 17th century experience. I can welcome you today on this fantastic September day. Very unusual for England to have such high temperatures at this time of the year. But it helps us in recording a beautiful orchard, the old one behind me, which dates to around 1900, and the new one, which is in front of me, and I'm going to show you a little bit more in a minute. Today's hint on what we are going to do is the apple. Now, in our orchard here, we have well over 50 different varieties of fruit trees, all dating to before 1700. And there's also a number of apple trees, all familiar to the Tudors in their time. Apples such as the crab apple, the codling, the golden harvey, the pippin, the winter queening, and even some that were imported from Italy, such as the Decchio, or Germany, the Edelstoffer, and a lot of French trees. Now, I'm not so sure about my pronunciation, so please forgive me, but I call them the Francatu and the Cour de Boeuf and the Rambourg France. But as I said, there's a lot, and two I'm going to point out to you specifically because they are the oldest on record in England. The biblical claim that God planted apples eastwards in Eden was geographically correct, because the genetic ancestor of the domestic apple grows wild in what today we know as Kazakhstan. In England and Northern Europe, apple cultivation may go back to Neolithic times. The Romans are thought to have introduced some varieties of apples to England, and others were brought into the country later by the Normans, the returning Crusaders, and even the Huguenots from France. And the very first named apple on record in England that dates to 1204 and is the famous pear Maine apple. The name apple, from the Anglo-Saxon appel, is similar in Celtic. The original meaning of the word apple is unknown, but it has been suggested that in Sanskrit, ap means water and pala means fruit, the water fruit. So also the Latin name pomum, from the verb poto, also means I drink. Apples were not just used as food, but there are several cases when apples were used as payment in kind. There's one example that dates to 1315 at the Runham estate here in Norfolk, when the yearly rent was paid in 200 per Maine apples. In his 1597 description, John Gerard names the apple tree the pom water tree. He also informs us that the skin can be red, green or yellow, and the taste is sweet as well as sour. He mentions that grafted apple trees are found in gardens and orchards like this one. It was the Greeks that learned the oriental technique of grafting the stems of improved varieties of apple trees, for instance, onto the rootstock of a native tree. In England, that would be the quince. There is also a record of Queen Eleanor of Castile, who the first wife of Edward I, who bought in 1280 grafts of the French Blanc d'Urel apple for her garden at the King's Langley estate in Hertfordshire. Medieval records also give us an insight into the value of the apple. In a fruiterer's bill of 1292, ordinary apples were sold for 3p, and 100 of the custard type were sold for 1 shilling. I only have the one, so to me it's priceless. The monks of Reading Abbey were entitled by an agreement to an annual payment of just 1 custard apple, possibly some kind of peppercorn payment. It is also believed that the custard was a cooking apple. The custard apple was first mentioned in England in 1265, and the apple is said to resemble a head, and hence the term custard head, which was used in Shakespeare's play Love's Labour Lost. Custard is also an archaic term for apple, or metaphorically used as a man's head. Therefore, in the play, Custard is a comic countryman. The British word costmonger, which is a person selling fruit from a street cart, might come from the name of this apple. Some historians dispute over this, and they would suggest that costmonger is Saxon English from Seaster mangere, which would be a town trader. William Lawson, a Tudor age botanist and garden advisor, said in 1597, to quote him, "Of your apple trees you shall find a difference in growth. A good pipping will grow large, and a custard tree, seed them on the north side of your apples, thus being placed. The least will give sun to rest, and the greatest will shroud their follows." And here we have a pippin. However, it's too young to produce fruit this year. It's a French pippin, and it was first mentioned in 1572. Right, today you are in for a little bit of a treat. Why is that? Because we are going to do some outdoor cooking on the open hearth, because it was actually a very common thing to do in Tudor England. When the weather was warm, sunny, people did do a lot of outdoor cooking, because cooking with the use of open fire was always a fire hazard. And so many houses, and even small manor houses like this, would have had the kitchen in an outdoor building rather than part of the main house. Anyway, please enjoy this very special experience today, but you are allowed to use your normal electric hob at home, of course. We are today going to make fritters, apple fritters, and I've chosen a recipe, again a Thomas Dawson recipe from about 1588 to 1597 from his book called The Good Housewife's Handmaid for the Kitchen. And it's a fairly long recipe. It's unusual in that it gives some quantities, sadly no good to us in modern 21st century life, so I have adapted it slightly. We keep to it as much as we can, but I let you know when we are doing a little bit of a modern version. Here are the ingredients. Obviously apples. We have then eggs. We are going to use the egg yolks only. A pinch of salt, sugar, fat, either this is lard, the recipe calls for lard, so animal fat, but if you don't eat that, substitute it with some kind of oil. The Tudors would have done that during Lent or fish days. The spices we are going to use is saffron, cloves, but you can buy the ready-made ground version, and then mace. Now mace looks like this, and it is in fact the sort of skin of the nutmeg. We also need some sugar and a pinch of salt, and that is, and of course ale. We need some ale. So what we do first of all is we are going to mix the batter. There's a strange thing about this batter. This batter doesn't list any flour nor anything else. Now you would argue, how can you make batter without it? You can't. It is my belief that Thomas Dawson knew that if you made batter, you knew to use either breadcrumbs or flour. Breadcrumbs is the more common ingredient. So I took the liberty and added that to the recipe, even though it doesn't specifically ask for it. So what do we need? We need a bowl to start with. Nice bowl. We need a Tudor whisk. This is what they would have used, but I'm going to use the modern version because this is made from wooden sticks. It's not the most hygienic one, and especially once you use it, you know, how do you clean it? So I'm going to cheat on this one, and I'm going to use a modern one. Sometimes you have to cheat as long as you're honest about it. Okay, so get yourself a bowl. He calls for a black platter, but I can't see how to mix something on a platter, so I am using a bowl. We start off with some ale. He says a pint. I'm going to use less for the demo because I don't want to feed 20 people. So here's some of the ale, and in the ale now goes all the spices. So I'm using the cloves. Now he asks for a spoonful. It's a lovely spice, but it has a bit of a side effect in that it can numb your mouth. So we don't want a full spoonful because I might end up not being able to speak properly. So I've just taken a pinch, can you see? But it's up to you. Okay, then in goes about the same quantity of mace, and we need the sugar, and then we need the 2 egg yolks. So we are going to put that down here out of the way. So egg yolks in the, so it's this one. And another one, he again asks for 4, but he is feeding an army. I am not, so I again have reduced the quantity. Okay. So we mix that in. And then we are using the ingredient he has missed out, but you can clearly see this is no batter. Or well, not in my world. Anyway, so we are adding breadcrumbs. You have to keep checking because you want a fairly thickish batter, not too thick, but also not too runny. Yeah, I think we are getting there, so I'm going to leave it at this and let it soak up a bit while I'm cutting the apple. Then we need a pinch of salt. And we also need our most expensive spice, which is the saffron, 1 strand of saffron. And what I'll do, we'll put it in there. It's very little, but it colors beautifully. And what I'll do is I'll put a bit of that because then it's easier to mix it in. Saffron was one of the most expensive spices in Tudor England, even though by then it was actually growing in 2 counties, Essex and Hertfordshire. But it's still, because you need so much of it, and it's funny enough, it's the season for it. The crocus, the saffron crocus is ready now, they're blooming now, only mine has failed me this year. See how it coloured it yellow? Right, we're adding this now to our mixture. So that goes, so you can clearly see the difference now, the yellow and the normal breadcrumbs. We mix it in again. Yeah, I might have actually used just a tiny bit too many, but I can always add more in a minute. We leave it there. What we do next is we have to prepare our apples. Again, I'm only going to do 1, but you obviously can do the whole lot. The recipe asks for 10. Again, I have halved them to 5. 5 will probably be enough. But again, you know, you get a feel for it. Tudor housewives didn't need much prompting or instructions. They just really knew what to do and how to do. And it certainly helps when you do Tudor cookery and you deal with original recipes. It certainly helps to know how things work, because you can make up the in-between gaps. Right, now in his recipe, he says you've got to cut the apple to the size of 1 groat, which is a coin. Probably that size, I'd say, maybe a bit smaller. But the thing is, I don't want to make such small bits because they get lost in my pan. So I think it's now time to put my oil, or as he did, the animal fat in. because it needs a little time to get really hot. And I am going to cut this into nice rings. And can you see it needs more fluid? So that's what we're going to put in. It's all about a bit trial and error. It might even need another egg yolk or so, because I'm working without any specific measurements, because I go by trial and error. I will do exactly that. I'm going to quickly go and get another egg, or maybe two, to make it into a nice batter rather than this. Okay, right. I have had to add more egg yolk to it. I also had to add a little bit more water. I should have used ale, but there's only so much alcohol I can use in a recipe. So I've cheated a little bit and added water instead. I'm sure there are plenty of Tudor housewives who did exactly the same. And I've also added a tiny bit of flour, simply because flour makes the whole thing stick better to the apple. When you do this at home, you might want to, and you're not very experienced and you don't want to play it messy, stick with flour instead. As I said, there are plenty of recipes that use flour for such a recipe. I just wanted to go really authentic. Anyway, the next step in the recipe actually tells me I've got to use my hands, so I wash them, and take my apples and put them into the batter, and then stick the apple with the batter in here, and wait what happens. Right, so here we go. Oh, isn't it lovely when you can play dirty in the kitchen? Right, there we go. Next one. I'm going to put a bit of batter on top. See, this is the benefit of cooking outdoors. You can't just really be messy. Why should children be allowed to do messy play and we grown-ups are not? Not fair anyway. Right, so I think that's going to just sizzle away here for a little while. You don't want it to be too hot anyway, because otherwise you just burn the underside and the apple isn't actually cooked. You want the apple to be cooked as well. So slowly and gently is the way to do that. And while we are watching these turn golden brown, I'm going to wash my hands quickly over here in an late 17th century wash bowl. How convenient is that? Because obviously I don't want to run around with dirty hands forever. So we put this there, and I can tell you a little bit more about the apples and our famous beloved John Gerard from 1597, who goes on to tell us that he knows somebody in Hereford, a master whose servants don't get ale to drink but apples, apple juice, which is very interesting to discover, because I don't know many sources that actually mention people drinking apple juice. We know about ale, we know about wine, but apple juice is quite something different. And he also goes on to say that it's this apple juice that they use for the drink called lamb's wool. And in the way how it's made is you use the apple pulp from roasted apples, and those mixed with fair water, note fair water, it needs to be clean from a reliable source, with some spices. And that is the drink that you should drink before you go to bed, and it will then help you empty your bladder in the morning without any complications. Isn't it interesting? It's also important to mention that he definitely preferred the apples cooked rather than raw. He says it's because he corrects the moist and cold nature of apples, which wasn't considered very good for people, especially when they were a little bit sickly, and most people were assumed to be more sickly than healthy. So he said by cooking the apple, you actually correct that imbalance, and a cooked apple is fine to eat, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. And yeah, so I'm going to just see what our apples are doing here. I might need another one of these to help me turn them around a bit later. And we might just need to put a little bit more wood under the fire, but we'll see. It smells quite delicious already. Can't wait. Shall we see whether we can? I seem to move a bit further into the source of heat. Tudor cooking, you can never predict the outcome. Even if you do the same recipe again, I can assure you it's never the same. And that makes it, at least to me, very attractive, because it's always a little bit of a surprise element whether it works or doesn't work. And as long as you stay flexible and you have some basic knowledge of cooking and what works and what doesn't work, it's fine. As you can see, I go along more or less as it develops, but I do try and stick to the recipes. But it's also interesting to see sometimes why they omit something and why sometimes they give funny instructions, like for instance this one, using your hands to put it in. You could see that with my hands I was able to just dunk it in and fish it out together with the batter, where with a spoon I probably would have lost most of it. I need to just get him a little bit further into the heat. This one here. Right, we just have to cut it here for a little while, because I do think we need to get more wood. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about fascinating stuff about the apples in late medieval Tudor England. Right, it's now a lot better, sizzling away with more wood underneath. Cooking on an open fire isn't quite that straightforward, nor is it as easy as using a modern device, but it's most authentic, and that's why we're doing it today. I have to apologize for all the smoke coming your way, but it just goes to show this is a real fire. Okay, I have attempted to turn over 2 so far, but I'll do the third one with you. So you can see that it should be done with 2 spatulas. It actually needs a bit longer, this one. It's not getting the same amount of heat as the other 2, but you can see that's how you do it. And while we wait for those 2 to be ready, I can tell you a little bit more about apples. A guy called Platina, who lived in the 15th century in Italy and always gives advice about healthy eating and how to cook things. He had the following to say about apples. He said, the sweet type you should eat before dinner, and the sour type you eat after dinner, because the sweet apples help to move your stomach and the bowels, where the sour ones don't. He also said that the sweet apples help with inflammation, especially in the winter time. Don't ask me what inflammation he's referring to there. And he also confirms, like Gerard still does in the 1590s, that apples are definitely damp and definitely cold, and could therefore be considered dangerous to some people. Oops, I just got some smoke in my eye. However, he said, if you are a healthy person and you eat the sweet apples, or you cook them or roast them, then they don't do you any harm and can be enjoyed. And I think we are ready to take one out. It's been in the pan for a good 10 minutes or so, and it should be ready. I think the apple should be cooked now inside. We definitely also have a nice brown crust on top. Yeah, Platina also says, and that always makes me smile, he says that apples moisten the belly inside and cool the stomach. I suppose, being an Italian and living in Italy in the summer, you do need help to keep cool, so the apple here will help you. Right, I am going to follow the recipe now, but I'm going to cheat a bit. The recipe says to take them out, put them on a platter and leave them by the fireside for a little bit. Now it makes you think, why would you do that? It doesn't serve any purpose. So I am going to add the modern purpose, and I'll put some paper kitchen towel down, and I'm going to make it I'm going to be a bit messy here. I need 4 hands. Yeah, Tom, please. I'm using half of them. I'll put them there. See, I've lost some of my batter. Not good. Well, you see, sometimes things just don't work out perfectly for me either. It doesn't matter. It tastes good. Yeah, if we put that down now, I just give these guys a turn over. Oh, I'm losing more batter here. Yeah, I think for this particular recipe, flour definitely would work better. Because, oops, I'm being attacked by flames here. Because flour makes it stick better to the apple, where our lovely breadcrumbs don't really do that job very well, as you can see. So we are going to leave that here. And we might just put that a little bit round. Yeah, we could do that. Just a tiny bit, so it doesn't completely burn while I'm doing this. See, it requires 10 hands doing Tudor cooking. That's why they all had plenty of servants. They didn't do it all by themselves. Even the humblest farmer's wife would have had a kitchen help. And you can see now why. Anyway, I've got our nice fritter here. It's got a lovely colour. It smells really nice. We've added the modern edition of the towel here, and we are going to flop that over now. Oops, no, not like that. See, it sticks. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't say that in the recipe. But look, now we've got it the right side up, and that's what we wanted. It's all fun and games, as you can see. So we're going to put that one in the middle. We'll make it look a little bit rounder. And following the recipe, it says sprinkle sugar on top. We do that, even though the recipe has got sugar in it, but the Tudors, especially the Elizabethans, and Thomas Dawson was one, they loved sugar. Sugar meant health, wealth, it meant everything. It meant heaven on earth. So here we have our sprinkled sugar, and we now are going to just put some nice touches, because Tudors did like to make their dishes look pretty, and here we are. It's very pretty, I think. Anyway, I have promised the family that they can eat this now, and they're dying to dig in. So I will have to say goodbye for today. Thank you for watching again. And don't try this at home, not on the open fire. Anyway, no, I'd love to see actually pictures of people who can recreate it at home. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next month in October, and we'll see what's cooking then. Bye.